So we shall see if we have attendees will start coming in. So hi, we'll get started in just a minute. All right, I think we can get started. So thank you for those who have joined us here tonight. We are here to discuss City of Miami's New Green Economy Report. That is a supporting document of our greenhouse gas reduction plan. But before I get started, I'm going to hand it off to District 2, Commissioner Russell, to give us some remarks about this body of work. So take it away, Commissioner.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you to the Department of Resilience and Public Works, as well as our consultants. I know you guys have been doing an amazing job of getting the city prepared for the future, and this is our time to roll out what we've learned so far and get some input from our public. My name is Ken Russell. I'm your City of Miami Commissioner for District 2, most of the waterfront of the city, and a lot of the emissions of the city, I'll say, with Brickell and downtown and most of the high-rise towers in our area. If you've been following along at City Commission, we are taking the issues of resilience very serious, including greenhouse gas emissions, setting goals for ourselves, passing ordinances with some pretty good teeth for benchmarking and retuning. We need to know where we are before we can get better. And that's what this report is about. It's about a comprehensive way to look forward. So we're not just talking in one dimension of emissions, but really about the jobs and the people and everything that comes along with it. So we're looking at a complete holistic plan for Miami to be as resilient as possible in this field. So I really want to thank you, and I look forward to this. I'll stay on as long as I can, and I've got my staff here as well. But I appreciate all the work you're putting into it, and of course, the public for their advocacy. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I just want to introduce everyone that we have on the call today thus far. To start, my name is Alyssa Farina. I am a Resilience Programs Manager for our Division of Resilience and Public Works, which is in our, sorry, I apologize, Division of Resilience and Sustainability in our Department of Resilience and Public Works. And in addition, we have Melissa Hugh, who's also a Programs Manager in Resilience and Sustainability. You heard from District 2 Commissioner Ken Russell and Assistant Building Director Jose Regalado. In addition to the city staff, we have our consultants from AECOM, Emily Schwimmer and Chris Brewer, who will take it away in just a minute with our overview presentation. But before we get into that, I just wanted to talk about kind of our run of show briefly, and then some framing to frame the discussion. So first, we will hear a presentation from our consultants at AECOM. Afterwards, we will have an open discussion of your impressions, your feedback, and any questions you have about the subject matter or the document, if you've been able to read it yet. We encourage you to be open and respectfully critical of what you hear today. You may ask questions in the question and answer box that's down below. You may add thoughts in the chat box. And then when the presentation is complete, you may raise your hand and we can call on you and you can share your thoughts, ask a question, however you would like to engage. Now, how this relates to our greenhouse gas reduction plan, Miami Forever Carbon Neutral. On Earth Day of this year, the city unanimously approved a resolution setting the goal for the city to achieve net zero greenhouse gas reductions by 2050. So this plan, Miami Forever Carbon Neutral, which is in its final stages of development, outlines how we can meet that goal through policies and investments in things like renewable energy, electric vehicles, energy efficiency, and the ways we get around Miami. The specific goal is to reduce, as an interim goal, we have a goal to reduce emissions by 60% below 2018 by 2035. The city, its residents, and its businesses will need to make investments in new infrastructure, appliances, and modes of transportation, as I mentioned before, but also we have investments in adaptation like seawalls, living shorelines, improved drainage, weatherization, and more that are considered in this report. So this report is a draft. It is an appendix of the plan, and it supports and justifies a group of actions related to the new green economy in the plan. And just to say that we are already investing money in climate through the Miami Forever bonds, community development block grants, and the American Rescue Plan. Just so we had those allocations announced yesterday, there is roughly $3.7 million in that funding that is related to upskilling, and $750,000 that are especially aligned for training related to technology and innovation that relates to the green economy. So this report can help us and others understand how to leverage these planned expenditures and achieve multiple goals. And before we move on, I just wanted to mention the collaboration that we've had with outside partners to develop this work. We did one-on-one interviews. We had group discussions with economic driving entities in City of Miami, including Miami-Dade County, Beacon Council, JP Morgan Chase, the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, the Miami Foundation, C40 Cities, Building Association of South Florida, Brickell Energy, the City of Orlando, the Clio Institute, Florida Power and Light, the University of Miami, and Y-Green. So we need these entities to continue to work with us and to build a dynamic and connected green economy ecosystem that serves the region. And they are going to be key partners in moving this work forward. So just a big shout out to all of those groups that helped us along the way. So now I'm going to hand it over to our consultants at AECOM to give us an overview of what our new green economy report details, and then we can have a group discussion after that. So take it away.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Brewer. On behalf of my colleague, Emily Schwimmer, and the fire truck that's currently going past, wanted to thank you for taking some time today to go through this with us. Again, this has been an extensive effort over probably more than 9 months now between, understanding this broader question about carbon reduction, but I think perhaps most importantly for most of us, it's, what does it mean from an economic development and a job standpoint? And I think for most of us, that sort of jobs connection becomes the, the more important thing of, how will our lives change and what will the world look like? So, I think we start with a couple of really simple notions here. We do believe through our studies that it's not just a question of making investments in mitigation and adaptation, and those are a cost. We clearly see a host of economic development opportunities linked to that investment. And some of these things are a big deal in terms of, capital investments for mitigation, but certain things are just happening very incrementally. They're happening beneath the radar. I was just noticing this last week that Department of Energy has a new regulatory standard for air conditioning efficiency for the southern US that'll be mandatory by 2023. And it will require, new construction projects to meet a new and more efficient standard for air conditioning. So again, some of this stuff is very modest, but over time will have a big impact. So from a city of Miami standpoint, obviously, we believe that there's a unique opportunity, but there's also a set of challenges that we have to respond to in terms of obviously vulnerable assets that are going to be impacted and the reality of climate change and climate volatility really creating a set of risks. But also we do believe that there's a very specific subset of city residents who are going to be particularly impacted, and that we have to make sure we use this moment to ensure that we mitigate those impacts as well, to make sure that these, both the impacts on the negative side are borne equally, but also the opportunities are shared equally across the entire city and system, across all of the residents. We do believe fundamentally that these changes are already happening on the economic side, and they're a good story. But what we're all about today is how do we start making more deliberate choices to maximize benefits and minimize impacts. Because I think we see real opportunities to accelerate job growth, encourage diversification, while also making sure that we deal with these pressing challenges about greenhouse gases and climate change. Again, it's not for the faint of heart in some ways. So what we ultimately wanted to do was, quantify this notion of what a green economy really is in practical terms. Wanted to understand the industries that are, have accelerated in the last several years, but also the ones positioned for growth. We wanted to think about a set of recommendations that the city can pursue incrementally, whether in terms of its own policy decisions, but also acting with other local units of government that share the same approach. So again, the coalition of the willing. But then how do we ultimately connect these sort of straight up policy decisions with broader efforts on the workforce development standpoint, support with universities to build a broader sort of innovation ecosystem around this green economy become important steps. And I know one thing that we talked a lot about with city staff was just this notion of who is going to be disproportionately impacted by all of these changes. Realizing that a lot of these lower income residents don't actually emit most of the gases. So how do we, not only resolve the climate change challenge, but fundamentally make sure that we're dealing with our underlying equity issues. I know specifically with COVID, we've seen some very specific impacts on lower income at-risk communities that I think remain in place in many respects. So coming up with a set of policies that not only deal with the long-term challenge of climate change, but also our immediate COVID recovery is, frankly, a clear goal from this effort. So I think to all of us, this notion of the green economy is a tricky one. And we would say it ultimately has two components. I think there's a piece of it which is fundamentally about a set of industries which help adjust to negative impacts on human activity. So 10 years ago, that would have been a conversation about, people who install solar panels. I think today we're realizing it covers a broader subset of occupations and jobs that deal with, for example, the building industry, where, we're now looking at installation of a whole new suite of building mechanical and electrical systems that are fundamentally a lot more sustainable than they were even 5 or 10 years ago. So thinking about that green economy, being able to quantify it is a fundamental goal of the effort. And for us, this really cuts across an interesting set of sectors. Again, I know in a lot of cities like Denver, there's a whole host of spending related to R&D focused on managing water more carefully. So again, a set of systems that we wouldn't have even talked about 5 or 10 years ago to think more pragmatically about managing water, managing waste, how we get around from a transportation standpoint. So probably 4 years ago, we did a study for Florida Power and Light looking at the economic impact of electric vehicles. And part of that boils down to a simple notion that, when you buy an electric vehicle, you're consuming electricity, which is more likely to be produced in state than gasoline, which is most of that economic benefit is produced somewhere else. So there's an upside there to electric vehicles that I have to think about. But I would also say there's a downside to some of these changes, meaning, we'll see the workforce shift. So with electric vehicles, there's fewer mechanical parts in electric cars, so we may need fewer people to maintain the car. We might need more people in other industries related to the service of those cars. So thinking carefully about how the economy is going to change becomes important. So when we think about this notion of what the green economy is, I think the core sort of green jobs are pretty small relative to the big piece. Again, 5,000 jobs, about $1 billion in output. Critically, these groupings of sectors are growing much faster than the economy as a whole. We do believe that just looking at these kind of growth rates, and also, again, part of this broader conversation about how the world is changing, there's a significant opportunity in the next growth cycle to really see significant growth in a lot of these green sectors. Particularly when you think about sectors such as transportation and buildings, where today a majority of the jobs are really not green, but again, just through things like code enforcement and policies, we can really start to increase the number of jobs that are going to have a say in how the region becomes greener in the future. So significant opportunities, maybe not in the next 1 or 2 years, but clearly over a 5 to 10 to 15-year cycle to really fundamentally change what some of these sectors look like. And again, I think the thing that we know during COVID, looking at some of those impacts, is that a lot of these green sectors have been much more resilient compared to, say, sectors such as tourism, which were heavily impacted by COVID. So that resiliency piece is an important notion as we move forward into the next growth cycle. And I think really for us, it's this key connection between, the sort of small and purely green conversation and these larger sectors. The reality is that on an annual basis, these traditional industries, so healthcare, higher ed, they buy a tremendous amount of services from sectors that are rapidly becoming greener. So $5 billion a year in spending. And so what that means is that these traditional sectors, as they spend money, are going to be buying more and more components and services that are fundamentally green. We think this incremental activity is something we can actually accelerate through not only technical advances and, again, market forces doing their thing, but also making sure that government policy is providing the right set of carrots and sticks to encourage movement in a certain direction. Again, we don't want to make it restrictive. We don't want to increase the cost, but making sure that we're incrementally moving forward. Again, there's a tremendous amount of money that's being spent on a daily basis that we can start to influence in terms of where it goes. And again, these policy goals in terms of what the city of Miami can do and what the city of Miami has already done to influence that. Again, things like Miami Forever Carbon Neutral. We were talking a lot with city staff about recent goals to talk about LEED certification for new buildings. All of these incremental steps help in terms of shifting how the private sector spends its money and ultimately gets us to a greener future conversation. So we think about what the sort of steps are for getting to this new economy, and really specifically the workforce conversation. I think we get to just an interesting set of conversations about, not only the set of occupations in the city that pay less than a living wage, but also the share of workers who are not white and are unable to access new opportunities. So I think part of what we're curious about is how this green conversation can ultimately change and improve some of the challenges for our existing workforce across the city. So again, white versus Latino, very different frameworks in terms of educational attainment. And we want to think about, again, a set of strategies that create more deliberate pathways into some of these green economy jobs to offset some of these pretty glaring and obvious inequalities that we deal with. So again, what we're really intrigued about, a lot of these green jobs that we're thinking about, some of them are actually quite accessible. When we look at, typical educational attainment for all jobs in the city and the educational requirements, what we want to try and think about is how some of our green jobs can be easier to access for people who don't have a college degree, may only have a little bit of a college or an associate degree. So thinking explicitly about a set of jobs that get us to better career pathways is an important component. So what we find for the green economy is that there's a significant percentage of these green occupations that do actually provide clearer pathways, lower barriers to entry. So, You don't necessarily need the college degree, but you have, whether it's years of experience, certifications, there's a relatively straightforward pathway to get there. And so one of the things we know we need as part of this green economy goal is a more explicit workforce strategy to make sure that we can offset against some of the structural concerns and really begin to move people into these, job opportunities of the future, if that makes sense. So last but not least, we start talking about growing this new green economy. As Alyssa mentioned, we've been trying to, engage a number of stakeholders to get at both strengths and weaknesses, concerns about the green economy and its positioning, and what some of the near-term, goals are, whether it be the next 6 months, the next 2 years, to advance our strategies. So again, a lot of stakeholder engagement to get at, facts on the ground during COVID, and now as we, begin to move forward. And I think one of the biggest things we noted across the board was, I think everyone agrees about the importance of this green conversation, but a clear lack of a champion to be able to espouse that. And I think we see that as a person and potentially an organization that can, ensure that we have a larger ecosystem. So whether that ecosystem is, that would include obviously city and local government, but also nonprofits, community foundations, so funders, philanthropy, again, this broad notion of workforce development groups that allow the economy to ensure that companies and people are able to find the workers and grow the way they need to. And I think for us, it's this notion of who is the champion who can, work within the political framework to ensure that things can advance and to be sustained over multiple years. We talk a lot about, the city playing a very specific role in this and, trying to expand staffing capacity to make sure that we can implement. I think one of the clear concerns we noticed in the study is that there are a lot of companies right now that are trying to hire and grow that have a connection to the green economy, but there's really, no outreach to those companies, no understanding of their needs. And that ability to provide additional outreach, in the old days, we would have called it a business retention strategy for green economy or business expansion strategy. But really fundamentally, ultimately getting to, questions we can't solve today, but the lack of a permanent city economic development arm, again, getting to things that we could potentially address in the next few years gets to be a goal that we want to get to. I think, this is really a short-term opportunity, but, just like a number of cities, Miami now has the opportunity to leverage a significant amount of COVID recovery dollars to actually begin to have a consequential impact, but also to more deliberately shape our opportunities for how we move forward in terms of benefiting the green economy. And I think this is a unique opportunity to, if we think about disaster recovery, which is something Miami knows, it's how do you use disaster recovery dollars to, to an extent replace what you lost, but also to pivot forward to grow and diversify. So there's a key opportunity now in terms of how we leverage these dollars to move forward. And again, I think this notion of a green economy in this ecosystem, we have disparate actors today doing their own things. And I think what we're trying to do is to understand how we can be a little bit more deliberate. So again, we're not picking winners and losers per se, but we're trying to build a more deliberate system that can help us make choices and actually, at least in our view, accelerate economic growth. So a lot of the recommendations get to, growing this ecosystem and working with our regional partners, sort of strengthen and clarify the city's economic development role. And I think in the short term, that's just a question of, we need staff resources to be able to make sure that we understand what's going on. But it really gets to a formalized set of steps, over the next few years to think about what the city's role is in economic development. A set of strategies related to understanding our green industries, making sure we understand what those companies need, but also from a city standpoint, again, through procurement rules, the city really has a number of tools that can begin to influence company choicing. And procurement is a very powerful tool these days in terms of shifting spending and shifting and impacting workforce development. Part of this is a zoning conversation about how we encourage green industries, but it's also, and what we see about green is we need a way of tracking and explaining what we're doing. So this whole notion of, sensors and instruments, but performance metrics to show how we're doing becomes very important as well. And then obviously just a near-term set of workforce development steps to begin to more deliberately create these deliberate connections in the broader economy and the green economy, and to make sure that people are finding their way into what is otherwise a pretty complex system. So I know in a few seconds, we're going to pivot to Q&A. I'm already seeing a couple of questions pop up. Alyssa, how would you like to handle Q&A? What are the questions that we have?
Yeah, great. So before we start getting into Q&A, I have a quick poll that I would like to deploy. So it's 2 questions, thinking about those list of actions that Chris just described, to select up to 2 actions that fit. One that you feel are most impactful for the city, and the other is that what actions do you feel the city should pursue first? So they might be the same, they might be different, but just wanted to gauge from your perspective, hearing that list of actions, what do you think that would be the most impactful actions, and which ones should be city priorities to address first? We have our own notions of what those things might be, but from the perspective of you all as participants, wanting to see if we are in alignment. So I'll leave this open for just a minute. And again, I can kind of read through these while you're deciding. So it was working with regional partners to align our goals, having dedicated staff on the city side, having a city, economic development plan, strengthen our procurement requirements, facilitate expedited review of projects that are aligned with our greenhouse gas reduction goals and adaptation goals, preserve zoning that supports green industries. So that's, businesses being located in the city, develop green economy performance metrics so we can track our progress. And as a workforce development option, expanding our Summer Jobs Connect program, that is a youth program for a youth internship program, to include internships with the green economy. All right, I think we have our responses. I will share the results. So we had some mixed responses. So in regards to most impactful, aligning goals, dedicated staff, procurement, expedited review, and having a city plan. And then in regards to what we should pursue first, procurement and alignment, we're ranking high, followed by expedited review and staff. So that's good. Oh, and we had one for the Summer Jobs Connect program. So thank you for that. So our goal here is just to get your feedback from everyone on, how to move this work forward, seeing the report, seeing the overview presentation, if there's any information that you feel is missing, how this information could be leveraged by you or other organizations to move green economy work forward. We're really open to hearing that. And then if anyone wants to raise their hand to voice a comment, they're welcome to do so. But I'll just start reading from our Q&A box here. So our first question here is, Are there workforce development plans or partnerships intended to proactively address current racial and economic disparities in the economy? Workforce development was mentioned briefly as something that needs attention, but what efforts are being made to act on this necessary priority? I'm not sure if the commissioner here has anything that he wants to say about that, and I can also answer if he. So I'll go ahead and just mention, as I said in the beginning, there is about $3.7 million in ARPA funding that has been dedicated to workforce development. That's kind of new opportunities to address these, that critical need for our community. And we do have our Department of Housing and Community Development that has some workforce opportunities, but I will say that where this report lies right now, it is a set of recommendations. So if this is, I'm interested to hear, and it seems that you are agreeing that this should be a city priority, and that serves as a good endorsement that we should continue to advocate for this. Okay, and next we have, what efforts are being made to identify a green economy champion? Is that champion ideally an NGO, fiscal sponsor for a targeted program, local person? So I don't know if Chris or Emily, you want to talk about kind of what you mean by a green economy champion and what their role might be for the community.
So typically what we would, in our perfect world, I think that the champion is a person who, again, could be city, but preferably would be maybe someone with a nonprofit who has the ability to be an integrator, who has the ability to leverage clarity from a public policy standpoint, but allows us to be able to sustain a conversation over multiple years. So someone that's able to, be in the room with the funders, be able to sort of speak to the workforce development side. So I think what we found elsewhere is that it's someone who leads a nonprofit or someone with a nonprofit to be able to speak to that effectively.
Yeah, in our experience, we had conversations with all those entities listed. And so, as Chris was saying, there did seem to be, support for the idea, but I think, have this report development and the interview process was definitely a starting step. And over time, we continue to grow that relationship and figure out who would be that natural fit and who might take over this work. And part of that, identifying that there needs to be a green economy champion is part of the reason why there was the recommendation for internal, some sort of city-led economic development, so that way we could play a role in that actively, as opposed to throwing a wish out into the community and hoping that someone latches onto it. We can take an active role in that process. Okay, and then the next question we have is, what is the role of weatherization in this plan? It is a focus for Miami-Dade County because over 80% of the housing stock is over 20 years old and needs update. Also, energy efficiency is already the largest employer in the energy sector in Florida.
I can take this one, Chris.
Thanks, Emily.
This is a great question. What this person is touching on is that the green economy is not just GHG mitigation work. It is also inclusive of climate adaptation work, which includes weatherization of properties and homes. Our research has found that what we're calling the building sector is already the largest employer of green jobs, or where most of the green jobs sit in the city of Miami. And when we were looking at types of jobs, that includes both things like energy efficient windows and systems like Chris mentioned, but also weatherization of or retrofitting of homes to withstand the elements of Miami, in addition to being energy efficient, et cetera. One of the groups we talked to is Y Green, which offers PACE financing, and they noted that some of the largest funding they give out or financing is for weatherization process or updates or retrofits. So all of this is in line with what this question is asking. So in short, yes, there is a role for weatherization in this plan, and it's most prominently part of the buildings industry sector.
Great, thank you. So now I want to move on, if we could advance our slides to some of the prompted questions that we have. So you have all heard from us, our recommendations for how to build a green economy, what the role, this is very focused on City of Miami's role and kind of what this larger regional challenge is. So things that we're interested to hearing from those on the call are if there are other policies, programs, priorities the city should be considering, and also maybe how other actors might fit into this, other information that's needed for other actors to take initiative, or is there just any sectors that we've, you felt that were not included that should be included. So just want to open it up. You can raise a hand, you can throw it in the chat box if you have any comments on any of those prompts. I know we have a small group, so I will be patient. Or I'm gonna pick on Galen as he works from oh, thank you, Commissioner Russell. I appreciate that. Thank you for being here. Oh, I'm gonna pick on Galen from Miami-Dade County quickly and just ask how this may align with the work they're doing in Miami-Dade County and what economic development work is that is being spearheaded by the county. So Galen, I apologize, but I'm going to pick on you.
It's okay. Hey, and sorry that Commissioner Russell just left there. Can you ask that question again? I just want to make sure I don't just jump off into the deep end. But
I would appreciate
at Miami-Dade County, we are absolutely looking at this, and I think it's a moving target. So this is exciting. This report is exciting.
Absolutely. So, as we spoke with your team and others from Miami-Dade County, and just wanted to, flag that, that has been an opportunity that we have explored. And I know the county does a lot of work on economic development, and you all are doing your own work on adaptation and mitigation. So wanted to see, from hearing that, what opportunities for alignment are flagging for you, and what is the city's role in economic development, if you could explain.
Yeah, okay, so there are a few things that I would say. We are looking at the report, the draft report, and looking for opportunities for alignment and trying to identify things that we think could be beefed up. That's why I asked about weatherization, because I think that we've identified that as one of the big opportunities to get multiple benefits around heat, storm resilience, and also energy efficiency, which are like multiples that we want. Facilitating that, making that happen is hard, but also could lead to big job growth in sectors that we're already good at. So I think that's something we're coalescing around, because we're still in our planning processes right now. The mayor, I would just say a couple of things that are important to track. The mayor has added an economic development director Kevin Greiner, has joined the mayor's office, and he's very interested in accelerating a low carbon economy and a green economy as part of the focus. And the Board of County Commissioners created passed a resolution that will create a clean tech task force. And we still don't know who all is going to be on that, but what it will do is generate a report, a lot like the Biscayne Bay Task Force report, that will have a series of recommendations about clean technology, which in the resolution says refers to processes, products, and services that result in significant improvements in either energy efficiency or sustainable use of resources by reducing negative environmental impacts and transitioning to a low carbon economy. So that task force is coming along. There's clear, and with it, that's clear direction from the board of county commissioners, which is the legislative side, as well as the mayor, that we're interested in this transition. So I think that aligns. And how we get there, I think the thing that I'm interested in as a staff person is how can we use this as something that we can use as a stepping stone, or like as a parallel partner. I hope that that's helpful.
Yeah, and Alyssa, the thing I would just add is, really across the US, a lot of our notions of green and clean tech really came to the forefront after the Great Recession in 2010. We'd actually worked on a big clean tech strategy in LA. The key I would simply point to, though, locally is, we know we did a lot of this work for the city of Miami, but we know categorically that many of the jobs the jobs and the companies in terms of the entire region, you could have many people that live and or work in the city or the county. So I think the key point I would simply stress is, working towards some consistent definitions for the types of sectors will really be important in terms of being able to tell a cohesive story, whether it be city or county in this case, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. And I think that speaks to our first goal, or our first action, which is aligning on, our actions and priorities. And again, having that regionally consistent set of goals and metrics and other things. So it's a great point and a great opportunity that you brought up. So thanks so much, Galen. Another comment that someone just brought up was that waste management, specifically composting or, smart waste management is a big opportunity and could produce green jobs. So I wanted to just mention one from the, carbon mitigation side. When we did our initial greenhouse gas inventory, we found that waste was about 5% of the city's emissions. The new accounting that we are using kind of eliminates them, but it doesn't mean that waste isn't an issue. And for the county, it certainly is, because the way that the emission counting works is just because it's a county facility and it's not in the city limits, it didn't, the methodology we used didn't count it for the city, but obviously we're still creating waste and it's still being dealt with. So just wanting to acknowledge that, yes, we agree with you. And I don't know if Emily or Chris, you wanted to talk about if there was, was waste considered where did it fall in our research, and just maybe how waste management was considered in this report.
So the short answer is yes, it was included. I think one of the wrinkles that we're always curious about from a waste standpoint is that I think based on how you look at waste, the job can be green or not green. So we think it's an important conversation in terms of clarifying certain aspects of the waste stream. I think, the part of it relates to the strategy with recycling, but part of it also relates to what happens to the waste and how we look at it. So I think it's one of those topics which fundamentally is going to have to be greener, but it's also one of those areas where it does get into the question of, how is waste handled regionally and how can that be improved, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So
Go ahead, Emily.
In terms of number of waste management related jobs, there's about 2,000 within the city of Miami. Those are both like pure recycling, compost related jobs, and then 2,000 refers to the full scope of both pure green waste jobs and then jobs that have the potential to become green, if you will, if there's enough demand to make that switch.
Great, thank you. And then if you could just advance one more slide, we have a second group of questions that I'm going to pose out. Oh, they're not included here, so I can just ask them. Oh, we had a comment here. There's 2 compost companies that are beginning to work with at the county. Neither are based in Miami. Compost for Life, Live Renewable, and then I know in the city of Miami there's Back to Earth. So there are some small scale companies that are working on the composting issue. So thanks for flagging those. Give me one second. I had a additional list of questions. Where did they go? Yeah, so I know one of them was in regards to yeah, so in relation to the workforce development, one of the questions was, do people feel that the community is prepared to take on some of these jobs that will come as a transition to a green economy? So when we're thinking about installation of, of bike lanes and seawalls, living shorelines, installing energy efficient appliances, improving insulation of homes, the weatherization, the electronics that are associated with the electric vehicles. So there's a lot of trade opportunities and a lot of software and technology, a lot of research, a lot of regulation. So thinking about those opportunities that are posed in our greenhouse gas reduction plan, do we feel that the community is ready for those jobs? And if they are, what's benefiting, what's creating that readiness? And if not, what needs to be done? Another question is, beyond what we've mentioned here today, is there anything else that the city could do to be supportive of the growth of a green economy? If you have a business or know a business, what kind of business support is crucial? What kind of workforce training is crucial? And then just lastly, just a broader open-ended question of, as the economy greens, how do you see that impacting your life day to day? So if anyone has any comments or wants to raise a hand, just thinking about the impact of a greening economy might have on them, just anecdotally. I know it's easy to say, but one thing that we've noticed over time in the city of Miami, or in Miami generally, is just the need for economic diversification. So to me, it seems like a positive opportunity for the city to diversify, become slightly less reliant on tourism and hospitality, even though those will always be key sectors here because it's such a gorgeous place to live, and maybe provide a little bit more economic stability for our region. So that's something that I think is a benefit of moving in this direction. All right, well, hearing none, I just want to say that I appreciate everyone who was able to join us this evening. We have an additional meeting to discuss the Green Economy report on Monday, September 20th. So that'll be run very similarly to this, but there's always a different conversation when there are different people in the room. So we encourage you to join us for that as well. In regards to green economy opportunities, the mayor is in search of a green technology specialist to help guide our Venture Miami effort, which is our economic development effort, as well as the city is hiring a new chief resilience officer. So if you or anyone you know is interested in that position, that is open and available. And before I conclude, I see that Galen has a hand raised, so I'm just going to let you can unmute, Galen. You have permission to speak.
Great, thank you. I don't want to cut off, but I did have one thought that was raised by our team to maybe think about, or you can talk about in response. But we are a majority foreign-born county, which I think makes us pretty special. And we were thinking that maybe it would be really interesting to hear what you all think about the potential for export of technology, either developed in Miami-Dade County or technology that's being implemented. But we have all of these international relationships, and getting a sense of that in here might be really interesting and exciting to distinguish us and to take advantage, to recognize where our strengths are.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that I think that is a major interest of the mayor's technology focus, is that leveraging and recognizing the strength, to your point, of us as kind of that gateway to the Americas, and realizing where we can import and export solutions. I know that part of the city's drive forward on climate technology, green technology especially, has been just because we are already somewhat seen as a leader in climate adaptation. So how can we leverage that reputation and take our solutions and have them implemented in a broader scale? So I think that's a good point, that's something that maybe we should lean into a little bit more and maybe explore a little bit more for a final version of this report. But I would definitely say it's on the city's radar, but to be more conscious about it, I think, is a great point.
Yeah, and Alyssa, all we would add there is, part of this whole, we call it outreach or business retention, but I think there's a real need for a more deliberate interaction with, the constellation of universities across the region, understanding what they're doing from a research standpoint, and thinking more explicitly about how well that basic and applied research can be moved into commercial development. But I think also it's a question about not only the universities, but a set of structures that can just ensure that we get a better sense of just what's going on in the region. So I think that ability to interact with higher education in a different way will be useful, and make sure we know what they're doing, if that makes sense.
It does, thank you. And I'm not sure, Emily, you had unmuted if there was anything you wanted to add. No, she's good. Great point on the universities, Chris.
Oh, and the one thing I was going to add was we heard a lot about pretty significant growth in tech employment in the last 6 to 8 months. And, we do think that sort of tech and software is going to be critical to a lot of these things. So, understanding what's going on in that rapidly emerging space would be important too.
Yeah, it's a fair point. When we had started this, there was no "how can I help" tweet. So that was something that was thrown in the middle of our research. So we're starting to integrate that into the research, but it was, that was not originally a consideration. Things have changed pretty quickly. since then. So it's interesting dynamic time for us. Okay, so the last thing I will say is that so this document is out for you all to read. You can visit miamigov.com/GHG plan to read the green economy document and to look at our greenhouse gas reduction plan draft as well. We are accepting public comments. So if you have any additional comments as you read the document, anything that you didn't get to voice today, we would love to hear it. There is a form on that website for you to submit your comments. You can also just email us at resilience@miamigov.com, and we'll be accepting comments through September 26th. So we really do hope to get some of your feedback, even if it's, this is great and we really appreciate it, just to let us know we're on the right track. So we would appreciate if you could just take a little time to read over this document and see how this can impact your work and help us move towards a greener economy. And if there are no other thoughts or questions, oh, thank you, Melissa, for putting that in the chat. Oh, someone quickly asked, has effort been made to consult with other municipalities doing similar or aligned work? I would say that we have mostly only worked with Miami-Dade County. We meet frequently with City of Miami Beach, and they are interested in the findings of the report to apply it to their own work. And something we have heard was, how this report can be leveraged for other municipalities.
And I'll add to that. Go ahead.
Sorry, Melissa.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to put a plug in. We spoke to the City of Orlando as we were doing the research for this work. They seem to be way ahead of the game in terms of thinking through all the components of greening their city and what that means for workforce development needs, et cetera. So we had a really great conversation with them, and the learnings from that are reflected in our report. Go ahead, I'm so sorry.
And the other thing I was going to add is, the Southeast Florida Climate Compact, which is made up of 4 of the Southeast Florida counties. We created a compact assessment tool to kind of see where municipalities within the region were with regards to adaptation and mitigation. And a lot of the mitigation actions align with this greenhouse gas, with the greenhouse gas plan and the green economy actions. So we are talking about where everyone is in relation to their efforts on the issue. And the idea is that once we assess where we are, we can then move forward on collaborating in certain areas where it's appropriate, and just all kind of row in the same direction. And then another initiative that we have is that we're looking at, again, regionally with other counties, putting forth or getting some ARPA funding to potentially put into this type of an effort. But that's in its very early stages. So yes, we are collaborating with other municipalities and other counties, but it's in the early kind of assessment stage. And the intent is to move forward and kind of have similar actions and leverage some cohesiveness in the area.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm acknowledging that these prompts are being posed as questions, but they can easily be formatted into we'll take them as comments of things for us to maybe expand and look into. This is again a draft, and there will be a final version, updated version of this document and our greenhouse gas reduction plan released later this year. So any this feedback and any other feedback you have of things that you think that the city should look into more or maybe dive into a bit more are very welcome comments. So I really appreciate that perspective of thinking about how this can be more broadly applicable. So they had an additional comment here if there's interest in capacity, we could look into Providence and Seattle. And I guess that they have some good programs for us to look into. So I really appreciate that recommendation. So again, to close us out, we have public comment open until September 26th. miamigov.com/GHG plan is the place to go for this document. This PowerPoint presentation is already up on the website, so you can review it. Our existing greenhouse gas reduction plan. In the document, something that might be helpful that I realize in our next meeting, we'll talk a bit more about is some of the actions that are slated to have a green economy impact in the plan. So you can see kind of the specific actions that we were considering as we developed this report. So I appreciate everyone for joining us this evening. I hope you can come join us on the 20th to discuss some more, and please send us your feedback. Appreciate it very much and hope you all have a good night. Thank you.